Kim, you're ready to start whenever.
Okay. Good afternoon. I am Kim Sertivin. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and president and CEO of Youth Crisis Center. And today I'm going to be talking about our residential crisis care program. And so it's really entitled Crisis Respite, a model from Florida. Youth Crisis Center's mission is to build a healthier community by empowering young people and families to rise above adversity. Our vision is a stronger community through stronger families. Today's presentation will have the following learning objectives. At the conclusion of the presentation, participants will be able to understand the respite model that helps to assist youth with mental health crises, explains how the Juvenile Justice Department assists and impacts the respite program through the various arms through the department, which is prevention, probation, and detention. And we'll be able to identify the therapeutic approaches that are needed to assist the youth with a safe transition to the community. Youth Crisis Center was founded in 1974 as Florida's first runaway shelter program and has now grown to be one of the largest and best known nationally accredited providers of services for youth and families. YCC's emphasis on care are for those who have been exposed to traumatic situations, including divorce, homelessness, relocation, loss of life, bullying, and abuse, as an example. YCC provides a robust continuum of care model for children, adolescents, young adults, parents, and families. We provide a variety of services on our campus, and in particular is the short-term crisis care program, mental health counseling, skills-based group training, and transitional living services for children, teens, young adults, and families. We provide more than a safety net for those in need. We transform lives to hundreds of youth and families each year. We're nationally recognized as setting a standard in youth services and have been ranked as one of the top 5 programs in the U.S. by the Youth Policy Institute in Washington, D.C. We've been honored over the years with 2 presidential commendations for excellence, have received numerous state awards by the state of Florida, and is fully accredited by the Council on Accreditation. We've been featured on 60 Minutes, Sunday Morning with Charles Kuralt, and The Wards of the Street, which was a national documentary. We've appeared in the New York Times, USA Today, and Reader's Digest, and have been featured numerous times by local media. And we were recognized in 2016 as Agency of the Year by the Florida Network of Youth and Family Services. So today's presentation is going to be particularly of one of our 6 programs, and this one is called Residential Crisis Care. This program serves youth who are 10 to 17 who reside in the Northeast Florida area, but we have been able to serve youth actually from all over the country. We are a nationally accredited program that typically serves a little over 500 youth per year who are in need of immediate respite care. Youth are often referred that are in crisis that could lead to the youth entering the delinquency or dependency system or possibly on the streets. Our residential therapists work with youth and their families to address the immediate crisis and help provide long-term solutions to handle future concerns once the child or the teen returns back home. Our goal is to reunite families by providing assistance and support with a clear plan for continued stabilization. We do so by utilizing 3 key principles of care, which I'll describe shortly: trauma-informed care approach, a positive youth development approach, and evidence-informed and evidence-based practices. We also utilize social support and relationship capacity building, understanding the youth's experience, while developing appropriate interventions and teaching healthy coping skills. And as a result, we provide access to safe and stable housing. We help the youth connect back with their school or to enter into the school system and possible employment. We are helping them learn self-sufficiency and the ability to build permanent connections with families, communities, schools, and other positive social networks. We work to improve emotional and social well-being. Interventions must address the developmental capacities and deficits in order to ensure the client develops the deficits into healthy capacities. Our interventions must establish protective factors in order to promote positive decision-making skills and increase his or her social emotional well-being. while really looking at what is the impact of trauma and how does that play the situation that the child presents with, so that we can make sure that we're helping to plan a healthy trajectory. So within the residential crisis care program, we serve these different types of children, and I'll explain each of these in more detail. In the state of Florida, our program primarily falls under a Florida Statute 984, and this is falling under the prevention arm of the Department of Juvenile Justice. It is called SENS-FENS, which is Child in Need of Services and Family in Need of Services. We also provide services for youth that are on probation, who may have been arrested or issued a civil citation for domestic violence, where the child is the perpetrator. We have been providing services to our local Department of Children and Families when their children are under investigation or the families are under investigation for possible abuse and neglect, and they're needing a period of time to try to rebuild the family. And we have been also serving those youth that are impacted by trafficking. So what is a SENS-FENS youth? Again, this stands for Child in Need of Services and Family in Need of Services. This population are children who are 10 to 17 years old. Every child who starts with us that meets this criteria starts as a FENS, a Family in Need of Services. And that means that they are not in court for any status of offense. They are not having any pending investigation with local Department of Children and Families for abuse, neglect, or abandonment. And they are not under any adjudication for delinquency under Department of Juvenile Justice. So these youth are youth that may have had some experiences or currently are on the streets as a result of running away, or they're threatening to run away. They are becoming ungovernable, which means unruly, and they're not listening to their parents or those that might be in control of them in terms of their caregiving. They may be truant from school or experiencing other school-related concerns. They may be considered a lockout, which is where the parent is refusing to allow the child back into the home, or they may be homeless. So every child who comes to us under this category is a FENS child. They would only turn into a SENS child, a child in need of services, should they continue to not be compliant with the services that's being received. So once we develop a goal plan for this child and the family, and if they continue to not be compliant with the goal plan, we can proceed to a case staffing that here's what the circumstances are, what's hindering the child and family from being compliant. The strongest recommendation that committee can make is to take the child to court, which falls under a status offense. So we have an attorney that represents the child, an attorney that represents us from the Department of Juvenile Justice, and the judge or magistrate. And they hear the case and they could adjudicate the child as a status offender under the SENS, which then now means that that child remains in the court system until they're 18 years of age or they're in substantial compliance with their goal plan. These are your deeper in children. For example, if the child has had some experiences with running away and we have put services in place and they continue to run away from the parent or the legal custodian, despite reasonable efforts, then they will be adjudicated as SENS. A youth also has adjudication withheld if they're in delinquency court. They may have a probation officer even when adjudication is withheld. They may also be a SENS child if they continue to not follow the goal plan or treatment plan related to school attendance. So it is not uncommon to receive a referral for a student who may have missed 50 plus days of school. We get the referral, we try to open the case, work with the families on them receiving services. If that child continues to not attend school, then we can process that child through our case staffing committee. Again, they can make the recommendation from there to the court system. And then further recommendations are made in order to get that child back on track with attending school. And if the child is also continuing to remain ungovernable with their family, we can take them to SENS court and make appropriate recommendations as well. We also serve youth that we classify as a special populations. So we have a couple different contracts with different providers for a unique population of children. The first one are for those youth that are referred to us under domestic violence respite. So this is a contract that we have with the Florida Network for Youth and Family Services. The Florida Network serves as the managing entity for the Department of Juvenile Justice. So the dollars come through the state to the Department of Juvenile Justice under detention dollars. And then from there, they're coming over for the Florida Network to contract with agencies to serve these particular youth. The goal of the program is to try to abstain from children entering our delinquency system or going into our Duval Detention Center, where you have the children who are deeper into the juvenile justice system. So it really is trying to work with those folks who mostly have misdemeanor crimes for domestic violence in our respite program to try to improve the behaviors that are going on at home. So these youth come to us whether they have been arrested for domestic violence or it may be a civil citation issued by law enforcement where the child and the parent agree to receiving services, and then the child can be brought to us. It is specifically designed for recently charged youth who are eligible for an alternative placement to a secure detention setting. In addition to the youth residing at Youth Crisis Center for temporary respite period, the child and his or her family will have access to specialized therapeutic respite services. The length of stay in this program is no longer than 21 days unless we can find that there is clinical reasoning to continue in this program. Another area of what we consider special populations falls under probation respite. These are youth that are on probation by the Department of Juvenile Justice. The youth is continuing to act out. They're not following what are the requirements of their probation, and their probation officer makes a request to us to try to resolve what the concerns are. Oftentimes it's the child and the family are not getting along, the child's not wanting to go to school, and so the probation officer will make a referral to us, temporarily removing the youth from their home and placing them in our therapeutic program to try to resolve the concerns. The length of stay in this program is up to 30 days unless there is clinical approval by the probation officer for an extension. We also have youth that come under as staff secure. So when I mentioned about the FINS youth and the SENS youth, a staff secure child is a child who is under SENS. So they have gone to court and been adjudicated a SENS child. They have been now ordered into our residential program by the judge to try to improve whatever the behaviors are that's going on. And staff secure means that the child is at risk of running from the program. We are not a secure lockdown program. It's a voluntary program unless court ordered, but we are not allowed to refrain or abstain from a child leaving. So it's a voluntary program. However, if a child is at risk of leaving, the staff secure position allows us for additional staff to build a report and trying to have additional supervision for that child so that they would be successful in our program. We also have youth that are here for human trafficking. And we have seen an increase in these youth over the last several years. And so if we have someone that has been suspected of human trafficking, then we will request some additional supervision of these children as well. We have also entered into an agreement a few years back to now serve youth, as I mentioned, through the Department of Children and Families. This might be a parent calling in to DCF that says, I can no longer, help my child. I don't know what to do. I'm about ready to give up my rights. So Department of Children and Families will make a call to us to find out if we can provide some services to them to try to repair the family. We also have received a referral for these youth if, for example, there is an investigation for abuse or neglect and they are trying to repair the situation at home. And so they will ask for the child to come here. We provide the services to the child and the parent. The parent continues to remain their guardian, but we are trying desperately to work with the families to repair this relationship before the child can go back home. So this program serves youth 10 to 17 who are involved with Department of Children and Families. and they may be considered a lockout due to the parents refusing also from picking them up from either detention or a mental health facility. There are some children that we are not able to serve. So if we have youth that are actively homicidal or suicidal, then we will make the appropriate recommendations, which in Florida, if we were to complete a certificate for involuntary admission, it's called a Baker Act. So if we do have youth that we screen who are actively suicidal or homicidal, then we can Baker Act them or call law enforcement to screen that child for a possible involuntary admission to a mental health facility. Also, if we have youth who have severe mental health issues, violent episodes, unmedicated and uncontrolled, and those are youth that are not going to be appropriate for this setting. Youth who may look like they're under the influence or appear to be intoxicated, we will send those youth out for a medical clearance through one of our local hospitals, and upon being cleared, then they can be admitted into the program. If we have youth that actually are requiring a special placement in secure detention because of criminality, then they obviously would not be in our program because we serve on the prevention arm of Department of Juvenile Justice. And youth that are not medically stable or require continual medical oversight. Unfortunately, Department of Juvenile Justice will not allow us to take youth who currently are insulin dependent, or if they're needing any special equipment, such as a nebulizer treatment while they're in the program. Those youth are not able to be here. We do not have a physician on site. We do have 2 registered nurses that are here for a specific amount of time, not 24 hours a day. But this is one of the requirements from the department that they say that we cannot serve. Youth that have extreme behaviors. So some of the referrals that we're receiving, especially today, we have some very violent children that have been referred to us recently. And so we have a crime index that we look at. So if we have folks, obviously, that have committed extreme violent behaviors, those are not youth appropriate for our program. If we have fire setting, animal cruelty, arson, those are looking at behaviors that are deeper than what the child is that we can serve in this area. If we have youth that are being referred to us for sexually acting out behaviors towards staff or have been in our program prior and did the same, or have sexually acting out on other children, they are not appropriate for our program. We have had, as I mentioned, some pretty violent scenarios of youth being referred. We had one just the other day where law enforcement arrested the child for domestic violence with the intent of the child trying to kill his mother. That is not an appropriate referral for us. And so we will unfortunately have to make referrals to other agencies who might be able to help that child. And if we have had children that have been in our program and they have acted out violently while they're here, we consider them a danger to themselves or others, then we will make note of that. And so upon that child trying to re-enter into the program, then we will look at some specific symptoms to determine if that child may have received some assistance before the next referral to us to determine if that child is safe enough to return to be able to come into our program. So here's what we do provide. Short-term housing and meals. Our average length of stay currently is 10 days. We have an on-site great relationship with our Duval County Public Schools. So we offer on-site academic instruction by 3 teachers. We provide individual, family, and group therapy. We offer life skills training. We provide recreational activities on and off campus. We have nursing services. As I mentioned, we have 2 registered nurses. So as we have young folks that are coming through, all of them are triaged by our nursing services. And if we have any that become ill while they're here or certain situations occur, then they will also meet with our nurse. We have civic engagement opportunities. We do provide transportation to court for the domestic violent respite youth and other outings on our campus. And we do provide referral and aftercare. That's 1 week after discharge, 30 days, 60 day, and we also now provide a 90-day follow-up. So the typical child that's coming to us presents with truant or school-related concerns. Often you'll find there's some bullying behaviors, whether they are the bullying individual or being bullied, and some continual behavioral concerns. Victims of trafficking, we're starting to find more and more of our children using electronic devices to meet perpetrators. Children are experiencing grief and loss. Domestic violence, where they are the perpetrator. Youth that are on probation or acting out as a result of receiving a violation of probation, or they're at risk of receiving. Ungovernable or unruly, and they're presenting with a variety of mental health concerns. They may be court ordered to us, as I mentioned, as a child in need of services. They may be homeless, might have some minor criminal offenses, and we often see these youth as stealing items, typically from various stores, possession of substances, trespassing, and battery. They may be considered a lockout from their parents, a runaway. They may have had a failed foster care placement or just have been removed from their parents, or there may be a pending investigation for abuse and neglect. So I want to go over a couple examples of cases that we may have, that we have had. We had an 11-year-old who was referred for negative behaviors in the home. She resides with her mother and her siblings. Her stepfather recently moved out after a divorce from her mother. There was a reported case of sexual abuse by the stepfather and physical abuse by the mother. Once we completed our trauma screening that I'll speak about further in a few minutes, there was an indication that trauma was occurring. There is a family history of mental illness. And so once the therapist sat down with the child and went through the psychosocial assessment and really gathered a lot of information and completed all of the screenings, they formulated a treatment plan. And this was looking at what were the things that were triggering this young person to act out. This young person was beginning to have some signs of violent propensity towards the family members. So we were trying to identify what were those triggers, what were the coping techniques, and exploring the possible trauma. As I mentioned, that she had made some allegations of sexual abuse by her stepfather. She was wanting to live with her father, who is currently homeless, and so that was not an option. And so through the therapeutic approaches, we use cognitive behavioral treatment, behavioral modification techniques to address the negative behaviors, and then she was successfully discharged back to her mother. The second case was a trafficking suspect that came to us. She was 14 years old, non-speaking English. Her mother didn't even reside in the United States, and she ran with a 23-year-old male from the state of Washington. She was picked up here for stealing items at a local store. She was residing with a so-called male friend or a mentor. And once she was arrested for shoplifting, law enforcement brought her to us because she did not score enough points to remain in detention. As best as we could through some communication services in order to understand the information that we were asking of her, trauma definitely was indicated. She didn't immediately come out and say anything about being trafficked or about sexual abuse or any of that nature. But it was through her behaviors and through screenings, and we had law enforcement involved with her sexual trauma unit that we did finally determine that she had been a victim of sex trafficking. She was here actually with us for 45 days. She did attend our school on site, as I mentioned, with an ESOL teacher, and she was taken into custody by the Department of Children and Families into a Spanish-speaking family. And she was so excited actually when she left from us to finally feel like she was starting to have a sense of family, to have a sense of home and structure. And so last that I heard, she was still in foster care and was with a Spanish-speaking family and doing quite well. So this is becoming more and more what we're seeing with these trafficking victims, where we might have a referral from FDLE, FBI, local law enforcement of these young folks that are coming in, being taken out of motels. And we're trying to determine what's going on with them and deal with the trauma that's presented. Many of these young folks are not openly talking about being trafficked, about being abused, looking at different things. And so we've had to do a lot of training with our staff to look at the behaviors that these youth present so that we can really drill down in a quick amount of time to determine if they are indeed a victim of trafficking. And the last example is a 16-year-old male who's referred to us by law enforcement for domestic violence on his mother. He does reside with his mom, just the two of them in their home. But he has witnessed domestic violence between his mom and dad. He has very little supervision and he's often left home alone. He is now attending school virtually as a result of COVID. But prior to that, he was really fighting his mom about going to school. Interestingly, is he's denying that he is the aggressor. He is saying that he is hitting his mom as a result of mom attacking him. So we have this difference of stories going on. He has received counseling in the past. He is not open to therapy from an agency that he was receiving services in the community, but he did come into us and did receive therapy while he was here. He does not have a diagnosis. We also did a trauma screening on him, and he did have definitely some exposure to trauma, especially between the domestic violence with his family members. So his treatment plan was really looking at coping skills, anger management, and trying to improve the relationship with his mom by using cognitive behavioral therapy and family systems. And he was reunited with his mother as well upon discharge from the program. So once a child is referred to us, we operate a 24/7 crisis hotline. And so what we're doing is really just trying to determine when a person calls in, what program are they looking for? Is it something Youth Crisis Center can offer them, or is it something that we can refer out? So we're determining, why is the child being referred to us? Are they eligible for what service? And we are now incorporating cautions into the COVID, looking at their screening if they were to come in for residential care. If we are recommending that they come in for residential, this program is at no charge to the family. So it's funded through it's funded through Department of Juvenile Justice. And so we're not looking at insurance or any co-pays. So it is free of charge to the family. So we are asking that they bring 3 days of clothing and medication in the bottle with a valid prescription. We are required by Department of Juvenile Justice to verify the prescription. So everything has to be in the bottle, labeled as it is, and then we have to contact the pharmacist to double check that prescription before we can dispense that medication. Again, we are not allowed to take an insulin dependent or a child who may be needing active treatments on the nebulizer. So during admission, we are going to complete documentation. So a typical admission is about an hour and a half long. Once they come in, and we ask a lot of questions and completing information, entering it into our database. Lots of documents to be signed, including HIPAA and informed consent. We now have included a COVID screening and identification form to be signed. And then we do lots of screenings to assess for suicide, homicide, abuse, allergies, self-harm, trafficking, trauma, and substance abuse. The needs assessment, which is what we call our biopsychosocial, is initiated upon intake and then completed by the therapist once the therapist is assigned to that child. And then we do obtain a media release. We have a few different agencies that come on site and provide recreational services, like Yoga for Change with our yoga services. And then we have visual art classes. And every now and then they want to come in and take some pictures of the backsides of the children during the services, whether it's art class, or if we were to have media on site to do any kind of interview, we want to make sure that we have the proper authorizations for that to occur. During the admission, we want to make sure that every child understands what they're going to be receiving, what a potential day at Youth Crisis Center looks like in residential. So we complete an employee or a client handbook rather that includes our SOGI policy. And this is related to sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. So we're discussing with them all about, being fair to others, communicating openly with others, respectfulness, and so forth. And so we want to make sure that we are addressing everything appropriately with these young folks. We asked them some questions to determine, are they going to go into a room with another client and share that room, or are they going in by themselves? Typically, children that are 14 to 17 years of age have a room by themselves. If they're 10 to 13, and they might share a room. But depending on what the presenting factors are, they may be alone in the room if that's the safer item. So we do what we call classification. So that's where we're looking at different aspects if there's a potential for gang involvement, if there's some violence, maybe some other behaviors that we feel that they need to be alone in a room, then we can be able to assign them as such. The program is 34 beds. And so we have 4 wings of those children, 17 male, 17 female, that we are able to assign a room to. So we do have plenty of space in our area that we can make sure that the children are safe based on the classification. We do go over what we call the abuse registry policy. So if they have any suspicion of abuse or neglect that they feel like they want to report, it is the law that they are able to make that call themselves. And so we have those numbers posted all around our program, and we go over the policy so that they can indeed make that call should they feel necessary to do so. We go over their rights and responsibilities, both as the parent and as the child. They all have rights, and they also have responsibilities of how they're going to function within the program. And so we make sure that they understand that. Should that child or parent have a concern with anything going on in the program, we go over how they can file what we call a grievance. And so we have boxes that are placed all around the program that if a child is concerned about something, they can make note of that. The supervisors check the box, and then they can go forward with trying to address what any concerns that they may have. We do complete a safety plan that is done between the youth care specialist and the client. So this may mean that if a child is going to be acting out, how do they typically like to cope? What is possibly triggering them? And then what helps them calm down, so that we can make sure that we're matching the intervention that best helps that individual. Likewise, if they are feeling triggered by something, who do they feel like they can talk with while they're in the program as well? We do an introduction of all of our team members, so who participates in the treatment team with all of our staff, whether it's our teachers, our nurse, our youth care specialists, or our therapists. We want to make sure that they're comfortable to know who the team is that will be meeting with them while they're in the program. We develop a behavioral management plan with them. And again, we do go over the program's schedule with them. We let them know that we do have school on our campus. And so while they're here, they will be admitted into the Duval County Public School, receive their education here. If they do live outside of our county, then those grades and attendance records actually will transfer to their school wherever their county is that they attend. We let them know what the recreation schedule is, what times they can make phone calls, have visitation, just really what does the day look like. Again, we want to make sure that they understand that. And if a child were to receive additional supervision, we want them to understand what does that mean. It's not following everywhere around. It really is about helping them through their therapeutic process and feeling like they have an additional supportive member of our team that can help them through the concerns while they're here. I wanted you to see what our staff have for training. And so we're required that each staff member upon their first year of hire receives 80 hours of training, and upon their subsequent years is 40 hours. And so within their first year, I broke down what the training is and what time frame we're required to have those trainings by. So starting off really is just looking at our program orientation. So again, sharing with them what our program entails, what Youth Crisis Center entails with all of our different programs, and just going over very clear expectations. The prevention intervention that we offer is called CPI, Crisis Prevention Intervention. And this is where we're mostly looking at how do we best de-escalate a situation from occurring without using physical restraint. We are not allowed to use physical restraint. Obviously, if a fight breaks out, then we have a measure that we're trying to make sure that we safely intervene in that situation. But we really try verbal de-escalation as much as possible. And of course, we have to teach first aid, CPR. It's really important that our staff understand development of the child and development of the adolescent so that they can understand as these children are going through situations, what's appropriate and what is not. We have to be trained in emergency responses. So we have codes within our organization that if a code is announced over an intercom, what does that mean? If it's a threat to a particular area, a bomb threat, so forth, we want to make sure that staff are well trained on that. Universal precautions and biohazards, cultural competency. We have quite a few hours are required in suicide prevention. Again, we do a pretty lengthy training on what does it mean for SENS versus FENS, and we want them to truly understand that statute and the requirements for that classification. We have signs and symptoms of mental health and substance abuse that they need to understand, and that's something that, in particular in residential, although we're not diagnosing in this program, it is often that we do receive a variety of mental health concerns. And so we want them to understand, what does it look like for a child to have attention deficit disorder? What does it look like for a youth to be experiencing depression? So as they see these symptoms or these signs, then they can be able to address it with the therapist. And so the therapist can make sure their intervention is matching the behaviors. They will receive extensive training on their behavior management. While the child is in place, we do have a behavior management system where they can earn points. Points are never removed, but they may be frozen. So depending on the behaviors, they can earn additional opportunities while in the program. But it really is having them understand what your behavior and the choices you make, what that does for improvements and overall success. We also teach about professional boundaries and ethics. We are required every 2 years by Department of Juvenile Justice to do a PREA training, which stands for Prison Rape Elimination Act. And it's a pretty extensive training as well, where they're understanding signs and symptoms of something that may be readying an individual for sexual assault, and how do we address that on our campus. We also review confidentiality and child abuse reporting, and then we have on-the-job specific training. Just for this program alone, because we do have youth that come in with medication, we need the staff to be trained on medication distribution. We're not allowed to call it administration because they are not licensed nurses. So they are giving medication distribution training, which is often done by our nurse for our staff. We also do training for non-licensed mental health clinical staff for assessing of suicide and fire safety equipment. As well as we are continuing the cultural competency, cultural humility, and then training relative to LGBTQ youth and addressing our SOGI policy. And then I listed the specific trainings that is embedded into the Department of Juvenile Justice training system. And this is required for residential for each of our youth care specialists. So we have to go over information security awareness. We do have particular data that is entered both for the Juvenile Justice Department and the Florida network. And so we are required to provide training in those areas. And then you'll see just some various HR related trainings, trauma-informed care, child abuse, human trafficking, and as I mentioned, a couple more hours of suicide prevention training. I also wanted you to see what it takes to staff the residential program. So we have 3 8-hour shifts. And so I have leadership team of chief operations and chief clinical officer. Then we have our residential director, shift supervisors. We always need someone that's in charge of each shift. And then also when that person is not working, we also have what we call a youth care specialist lead. And then it takes about 3 to 4 youth care specialists. Again, we're a 34-bed program, so rather large. And so we have a 1-to-6 ratio that is required of us by Department of Children and Families while the children are awake. And then the ratio changes to 1-to-12. And so with 34 kids, we're always staffed for over 5 or 6 youth care specialists on each shift. We have an integrated service specialist, and this is an individual that helps out kind of as a floater on each of the units. He also is providing all of the follow-up calls and helps as well with different recreational activities with the youth. We have a lead residential therapist and then 2 additional therapists. We are also a training agency, I do believe in giving back to the community. And so we do have relationships with various university systems where we are training master's and bachelor's level students here, whether it's in criminal justice, social work, or mental health, that are also assisting on the unit. 2 food service specialists and 2 part-time nurses. So what do we often see? We see youth experiencing symptoms with ADHD, depression, bipolar, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, attachment disorder, oppositional defiant, and conduct disorder. Again, we're not diagnosing these, but we are seeing symptoms quite a bit of children coming in. And also on the screening form, when we have individuals calling in, we're asking them, or do they have any mental health concerns? And these are the diagnoses that the family members are presenting to us. The therapeutic services provided. I've been at this organization 20 years. I started as a therapist in this area, and I saw our system back then being more of an emergency room for youth and families. And we were only seeing children stay in our program an average of 3 days. And as a therapist, it was very frustrating because I would see the child leave before I could really get started with any kind of work. And so I really believe in slowing it down some so that we can really take a look at these children when they come in and crisis has just occurred. You're not often going to be able to receive the information you need. And so we are required within 24 hours to meet with that child and complete as much as we can of a biopsychosocial, and then formulate a plan. What are we going to do? And so that takes time. And so that's what's led over the period of time for our children to remain here a little bit longer, to now have that 10-day average length of stay. And so while each child is with us, we are now providing individual therapy 2 times a week. Each child receives group therapy 3 times a week, and we are required at least once a week to meet with the family. We are additionally providing supportive counseling, and this is really a service of our interns where they're meeting with the children on the unit or off the unit just to see how their day is going, feeling that additional level without providing per se an intervention, but just to check in, make sure that that child feels like that they have someone that they can talk to that may not be their therapist, but an additional supportive role. We provide crisis intervention. So it may be that the child had a really bad phone call with their parent. Maybe the child thought they were going home and the parent said no. And so a situation may occur. And so we may have to go in and provide an immediate response to try to de-escalate a situation from occurring. So we are providing crisis intervention for that individual. As I mentioned, we're doing a biopsychosocial assessment. We are assessing for self-injurious behavior, psychosis, suicide, and homicide. It is alarming to see the number of children who are at risk for suicide. We have had throughout the state other agencies that are similar to ours where there has been some completers for suicide, and it is extremely traumatic to see these individuals come in, and all of them that have been completed, the individuals will say that worked there was nothing that gave them a warning. But going back to look at the individuals, some of the situations was just that, a bad phone call, but the staff member didn't know on the other end. Child hung up, went to their room, and they hung themselves. And so it's really important that we monitor these phone calls, we monitor their actions while they're here as much as possible. Our children are never allowed in their room just to go and hang out. They all have to stay together on what we call the mod, which is the unit, until it's time for bed. And then once they're in bed, the doors are always open, and we're required to do 10-minute checks of those children. And so it's a very unfortunate thing, but quite a few folks are at risk for suicide and homicide. And so that is why there are so many hours of training relative to those topics. And we have to do so many screening questions with them to ensure that they are not needing to have an enhanced level of supervision. We are completing a goal plan, what may be called there. We drill down to how can we make some improvements. Again, this is a crisis program, so we're not fixing everything in a short period of time, but we are looking at how can we make some improvements while we're here so that we can appropriately make a referral upon discharge. As I mentioned, we have a wonderful relationship with a program or an agency called Yoga for Change. And so they have a curriculum that is specifically for the youth that we're serving. We now have both males and females that are in the program at separate hours, and they love this activity. So they come every week, and they're providing yoga and relaxation for our youth. And we also have a great opportunity with Cathedral Arts Project here locally, where they are providing visual art classes every week. The children have treatment team twice a week, and this is where we're finding out how are they doing. What are the needs of the child? Are they on track for everything that we've talked about with their discharge plan? Are they successfully meeting their goal plan? Do they have additional referrals that are needed? And so this opportunity is presented twice a week. And if we need to have it more frequently, we can. The youth are receiving life skills training 5 times a week by our youth care specialist. So this may be on budgeting, it may be on hygiene, it may be on anger management, whatever it is, social skills. Communication is a huge area that we're talking about with these young folks and their emotions. And so we're providing that opportunity 5 times a week. And we also have psychiatry on our campus. And so if we find that the therapist and the family are determining that the child may warrant a psychiatric evaluation, they can do so while they're in this program as well. The youth participate in psychoeducational and therapeutic groups, as I mentioned, 3 times, and then they also have life skills 5 times per week. The group topics include healthy relationships and boundaries, coping with change, self-esteem, communication, peer pressure, and substance use. And these are the curriculums that we're using to address their concerns. Every child while they're in the program is also receiving case management. So we're working on a transition plan, actually upon admission. What is their plan? Is it to return home? Is a family member going to be able to discharge this child and they're going to go live with another family member? Often we see, a mom may say that the child's going to go live with dad or a friend. So whatever that is, we want to make sure that 1, it's safe, 2, it's trusting, and 3, it's appropriate. And so we are talking about what that plan is. We also come with an aftercare plan. So once the child is ready to go home, what happens, if a parent decides that they're not seeing the behaviors that they thought the child would have changed, what does that plan look like? Oftentimes we are suggesting that they return for outpatient therapy so that we really can drill down for a longer period of time of what led to the crisis and provide more tools for them post-crisis. And so we will provide aftercare and supportive community care as well. When the child comes in, depending on what they're presenting with, we also complete these assessments. So we have an adolescent domestic battery typology tool. This is for a child who is exhibiting domestic violence as where they're the perpetrator. So if they're coming in with various behaviors, whether they have been arrested or issued a civil citation, or we might find out that there was some domestic violence in the home, we will complete this tool. We are giving each child the personal well-being index, and we are reviewing and assessing for trauma. Youth Crisis Center rebranded 3 years ago, and in part, we were continuing to talk about serving at-risk youth. And my board really sat down and we talked about what is an at-risk youth. Everyone seems to be at risk of something. And what we walked away with is every child came to us, for the most part, have been exposed to something horrible. To what degree that was individualized. And so we really took an emphasis on trauma to make sure that the youth that we're serving have the tools necessary to endure that trauma, to be resilient, to move forward. And so we now are implementing this trauma screening called the TESI, the Traumatic Event Screening Inventory on each child. So the Adolescent Domestic Battery Typology tool, Youth Crisis Center piloted this tool that was asked of us by the Florida Network of Youth and Family Services now about 1.5 years ago. And this tool really is trying to classify the domestic violent behaviors into 4 typologies. Those typologies then try to help with the development of an appropriate goal plan. And so it is allowing for an increased understanding of the differences among the youth along a risk continuum. It's a reliable and valid tool designed to aid in treatment planning by identifying youth at risk of committing another act of battery. And so I wanted to have you look at what the different typologies are. So the defensive is any violence that is directed toward the parent in a response to a physical threat. So in the instance that I gave you on the scenario where the youth was brought in by law enforcement, mom is saying that the child acted violently toward her. The child is saying, no, my mom did something and I was in defense. So this is what that typology would have looked at as a response. Most of the kids that are coming to us, this is what we're seeing. And it's really sad, and I'm really happy of our criminal justice system and law enforcement system to start issuing civil citation for domestic violence, because it was sad that most of them were issuing an arrest, and that can really hurt a child's record, whether it's for college or for employment or military. And what I was seeing is that a lot of the arrests for domestic violence included instances of a parent wanting a cell phone from a child wanting food, mom not wanting to give food, and a fight ensues. And so somebody hits somebody, officer arrives and determines to arrest the child for something like that. And that is really sad. So maybe about 2 years ago, I started seeing some changes in our local law enforcement where they were now issuing a civil citation, which does not affect that child's record. So defensive is often what we see, but we also have something called isolated incident, which is when an event of aggression is born out of an atypical family or individual of stress. So without the stress, violence would have not occurred. So something happened in the home and the child reacted. It could have been that the child was reacting to something that a parent may be doing to another parent or to another sibling, and the child was acting in that way. So it wasn't where they were the individual person being received of the violence or by the threat, but they were acting in defensive of something else. Family chaos is a pattern of events where the youth's behavior spirals to the point of aggression in order to obtain his or her purpose, and characterized by inconsistent, unclear parental authority. So this is just where we have a lot of yelling and screaming and violence and out of control scenarios. And there's multiple instances of violence by multiple individuals in the home. And so it is utter chaos in that situation. And that's where we're trying to really understand, how do we help that family look at their triggers and develop an appropriate goal plan so that all of them are being able to live together again, and it's in a safe environment. Your escalating is scary. It's a pattern of behavior designed to intimidate, control, and coerce the parent into giving the youth's demands. So this is your child. It is a very collective, cold, calm, and collected, basically, in their behaviors, and then they become violent. So if they don't get something, they use intimidation and fear to get it. And if they don't, their behavior escalates to a point of violence. And so, again, being able to give this assessment, look at these different typologies, and those typologies help you understand what are you working with, so that you can formulate an appropriate goal plan. As I mentioned, we do also give the personal well-being index to all children. And so this is really just us looking at life across all different domains to find out how well are they doing in these areas. And so we're giving it at admission, and we're looking at it again in discharge to see if thoughts and behaviors can change, to see if there's any improvement. So we're looking at their standards of living, health, how are they achieving in life and what goals they may have. We're looking at their relationships, how safe do they feel, what is their connection to the community, future security, and if there's anything related to spirituality or religiosity. The tool is given again, as I mentioned, at admission, and then again in discharge to look for improvement. And then again, the traumatic events screening inventory is provided to all of the youth experiencing a variety of potential traumatic events. And so we're looking to see what may have occurred in their past, what they might be experiencing currently, looking at any injuries, hospitalizations, violence, disaster, so on and so forth. It's 24 items, and it is developmentally appropriate to assess the level of exposure each of these children have. And again, all of these different screenings helps our therapists be able to determine an appropriate goal plan or treatment plan for successful discharge. The last screening we use is CRAFT. CRAFT is a mnemonic acronym, and it's used to assess substance use. Yes, in our needs assessment, we do an ATOD, which is alcohol, tobacco, and other drug assessment, which really hones in on a specific substance, age of onset, and how much use. But this also drills in of what is the propensity or the risk of substance. And it may not be them actually using, but maybe putting their life at risk. For example, are they getting in a car with an individual who might be under the influence? And so the CRAFT acronym focuses on CAR, relax, alone, forget, friends and trouble. And so you're asking a variety of questions, such as, have you ever been in a car with someone under the influence? Would you get in a car with someone you knew was under the influence? And if they answer yes to a few questions, you move into the next series. So it's a quick screening tool to look at substance use or abuse. And then we do a human trafficking tool. This is also for those that may be coming in with potential risk of being trafficked. And so it is really just to determine if a person might be or is being exploited. It's a guide to help. This guide is designed to help those who come in contact with youth who may be at risk, and screens from all forms of possible human trafficking. So this is required of us of our contract. So if a person comes in, we determine that they may be at risk based on some questions and things that the youth is saying to us, then we complete this tool and we have to send that off to the Florida Network for Youth and Family Services. And then we may place that individual, as I mentioned, on special populations where they now will receive some additional supervision to ensure they're safe while they're in our program. These are the various interventions that our therapists use while the youth is with us. Most often we see is cognitive behavioral therapy. We also utilize solution-focused, trauma-focused cognitive behavioral, brief strategic, family systems. As I mentioned, crisis intervention should we need to de-escalate a situation. We utilize motivational interviewing when asking our questions, and all of our staff are trained in that. We utilize a trauma-informed care approach while also ensuring that we are using positive youth development. So just wanted to explain a little bit further about trauma-informed care. It's a harm reduction and trauma-informed approach to services. Staff engage clients who have a history of experiencing trauma by recognizing the presence of the symptoms and the stress that it presents, and acknowledges the role that that trauma has played. So it really is teaching our team to not just say, why are you here, but what has led for you to come to Youth Crisis Center. It's rephrasing how you're asking questions so that they don't become defensive of what led them to be in our program. It helps staff be able to shape their beliefs about the future and how to assist in the development of positive and healthy coping skills. It provides support so the client feels safe and secure, and it helps the client develop and maintain healthy relationships and understand their supportive network of their close friends and relatives. And it reduces unnecessary secondary exposures and separations. It assists the client to return to typical routine. So if something traumatic has occurred, whether it's at school or in their home, utilizing this approach, looking at the different therapeutic interventions we're using, helps them try to get back to some sense of normalcy. So we're looking at how can they feel safe in those situations, what are their triggers, how can they go about doing so, so that they can return to their typical routines. It facilitates open but not forced communication with the client about his or her reactions to the event. It encourages and supports by help-seeking behaviors by creating a supportive environment for the varied reaction and different paths of recovery. We help to address how the trauma has impacted the youth and families and their perspective on what has occurred and the ability to shape their beliefs about their future. Do they find that they have hope? Are they resilient? Are they able to bounce back from this? What are the interventions necessary to help them overcome these different aspects of trauma? And it also helps us to monitor and refer the client for additional clinical trauma evaluation as necessary. Through the positive youth development approach, we're focusing on the services and opportunities for peer mentoring, youth leadership and decision-making, and volunteerism. So it's including the client in on their treatment while they're here. It's including them on the conversations, not just strictly directed by our staff to the child. It fosters support of all youth and clients in a positive, healthy, upbeat, and holistic manner by developing a sense of competence, usefulness, belonging, and empowerment. It helps to promote bonding, foster resilience, promoting competencies with behavior, socially, emotionally, cognitively, and morally. It fosters self-determination, self-efficacy, clear and positive identity. It helps them understand a belief in their future and where they belong, and understanding pro-social norms. And it provides recognition for their positive behavior and opportunities for pro-social involvement. So this correlates with our behavior management system. So when we're going over program rules, responsibilities, and rights of the client, we are incorporating that through the trauma-informed care approach, by making sure that they understand that and feel like they are too part of the program, not just in the program. It aids in developing protective factors, and these pertain mostly to safety and security. How are they feeling in different situations with psychological safety as well as the physical safety? They understand clearly stated expectations for behavior that's now identified in our handbook. So again, that's why we're taking the time at an orientation to have them truly understand their role in our program and what they play with choices. If they're going to listen to what we need to have them do so that they can ensure that they're improving their behaviors, improving their emotions, and their overall well-being, then they will be successful in the program. It's opportunities for client participating in programming, policy making, and governance. So when we have our annual review or annual audit by the Florida Network of Youth and Family Services, they are including them in on youth surveys. And so the auditors are coming in and they're meeting with our clients and they're asking them, do they feel safe in the program? What do they like about the program? What could they change? Do they feel like they're benefiting? And so they want them to be part of the program. And as we need to make changes to our policies, we are listening to our clients and making those changes as necessary and appropriate. It's improving the emotional and moral support and teaching them about supportive and safe adult relationships. Many of our young folks present and tell us that they do not have a trusting relationship with an adult in the community, and that's very scary in this time. They don't feel safe to go to their parents. They don't feel safe that they can go to a teacher. They don't feel like that they can trust them. And so it's really important for us to understand where has that distrust come and how can we ensure that they can develop a trusting relationship moving forward. It's an opportunity to help them feel like they have a sense of belonging and a sense of value. Many of our young folks come in and I've asked a group of individuals before, how are you developing your values? Is it because of what your parents are telling you, or do you feel like you have your own opinion on things? And sadly, they didn't feel like they had a say. They didn't know their own opinions. They didn't know their own values. It was just what was. And so it's really teaching them what is important to them. What is, again, looking at a trusting relationship, looking at choices for their future and where do they belong in that spectrum of that. And so it's trying to work with them to have a sense of that belonging and personal value, and talking with their parents about that. They're all individuals, and even though parents have rules and we have a say in our home, we're making sure that our families and our children understand the communication to develop a family system that is healthy. We're helping to teach these young folks about mastering skills, life skills necessary for self-sufficiency. And so those are critical for us and including them in on our programming, in particular around life skills. It's an opportunity to develop positive social values and norms and to appreciate and contribute to the community. And we're building strong links between families, schools, and community resources. We often ask our young folks, are they involved in any community activities? And many of them are not connected to anything in our community. There are no outlets, no school opportunities, no community, no religious, no spirituality, nothing. And so that's something that our community is continuing to work on and improve so that we can work with that family on feeling that that child has a sense of connectiveness outside of school. And of course, our program wouldn't be successful without lots of partners. So I just wanted to address, we have 4 homeless shelters here just in Jacksonville. And so as we find our families are on the streets or living in motels or unsafe situations, there are times that our homeless shelters will refer a child to us for residential. The parent may feel that they don't want the child in the shelter, and so they would rather have them in our residential program, and we can stay connected with that family through that homeless shelter. And so we will receive referrals from our homeless shelters. Feeding Northeast Florida is a fabulous partnership. This is where we partner with them on receiving food. Fruits and vegetables and dairy items all are at no charge. And so our food service specialists will go to Feeding Northeast Florida and grocery shop essentially. Then we have other items that we do purchase through their system at a reduced cost as well. So it's not a food pantry, but it is a large warehouse of various items that you can buy in bulk. And so we have a fabulous partnership with them. And we had a great opportunity during, at the height of COVID, where we were needing to receive some additional items. And so great partnership there with Feeding Northeast Florida. We do have a couple transitional living programs in Jacksonville. And so these are programs for youth that are 18 to 24. And so we also offer a transitional living program, but if we have an individual that might be aging out of our shelter environment or residential program, we may partner with another provider if we feel that that's a better referral for them to go there. And so we will definitely make a referral. Also have great partnerships with our domestic violence shelters for referrals, as well as our crisis action team. And those are individuals that are assessing for suicide and homicide and other risky behaviors. And so if we find someone that needs to be referred to that program, or likewise to us, once the crisis is somewhat stabilized for the suicide and homicide piece, they will make those referrals. Florida Youth Challenge Academy is similar to like a ROTC military type program. You apply to go, they accept youth twice a year. It's located at Camp Blanding out in Clay County. And it's really a military type program that is a 30-day stay. The youth are able to understand what ranks mean. They look at the different behaviors. They have a year-long mentorship upon successful completion. It's an excellent program. I hate to call it a boot camp, but it is more or less a program that really does look at various behaviors in individuals. Zero tolerance. So if there's any substances going on, or if a child is really not committed to wanting to enter into this program, they will not be accepted. And I personally, when I was providing therapy, had some youth that went through this, and it was life-changing. We also have great partnerships with our local businesses. And so, as I mentioned, we often have recreational opportunities for our youth to go off campus. And so we were, prior to COVID, we were taking them to movie theaters and bowling alleys and our local NFL football games, local college tours, and so forth. So for right now, we have not been offering any off-site activities, just been providing on-site, but we do really look at those businesses to make that happen. We've been involved with our local Rotary clubs, and this has more or less been for donations. And so several different clubs have gotten together and come up with a different project for various programs. And so we have been able to receive laptops, for example, from some Rotary members for our clients, and different positive opportunities, including some funding for different programs. We certainly couldn't do it without our local school district. Huge referral source for us. Various things are occurring in the classroom setting, and through lots of outreach in our school districts. They are aware of our programs. And so our school district is a huge referral source for the services we provide. And as I mentioned, we do have an on-site Duval County Public School here within the residential program, where we do have 3 teachers. And so we have a principal, we have an assistant principal. When we're doing statewide assessment testing at the end of the year, so are we, so that we are following everything within the calendar of our local public school. So a huge partner is our school district, as well as law enforcement. We do have a stop station on our campus as well. So law enforcement can come in, whether they're completing paperwork or need a break. It is always wonderful to have a wonderful relationship with your local law enforcement. As they see youth on the streets, running away, going to different family situations, they are aware of all the programs that we offer, and is a great referral source. We've increased our referrals from our pediatricians and primary care doctors. So as doctors are doing well checks and seeing families for different situations, they know about our services and know what they can do to try to help that family in that office. And so we have seen an increase in particular with our pediatrician referrals. As it relates to Department of Juvenile Justice, not only is our funding coming through that arm of prevention and detention, but we do receive referrals from the probation office and the Juvenile Assessment Center. So in Florida, oftentimes you'll find that as a child is arrested, they will go to the local Juvenile Assessment Center for processing. Through that processing, they're doing their own screening to determine, can that child go home? Can that child go into Youth Crisis Center's residential program? Or does that child need to remain and go into detention? They would go to detention if they have scored enough points based on the crime committed or based on priors. So we do have a relationship with the Juvenile Assessment Center. Should they have a child to refer to us, they just send us a referral and then we go and pick the child up upon them being eligible. We also receive referrals from the State Attorney's Office, Department of Children and Families. We do receive referrals from our funder through the Florida Network of Youth and Family Services. They're based in Tallahassee. We have a great relationship with our local NFL team where they have provided food baskets to us. They've provided some financial dollars to us through small grants, as well as tickets for our youth to go and to watch the games. And so it's been a wonderful partnership, as well as receiving referrals from Police Athletic League. We do have a local homeless coalition, and they're responsible for screening and tracking of all homeless youth that are coming into the program. And so they also provide funding. We do receive some funding for meals and a shelter stay while they're here. And so that has been a great partner. We are involved with the Human Trafficking Coalition. As I mentioned, our youth participate in Yoga for Change and Cathedral Arts for visual arts, and as well as the yoga classes in residential. We have a great relationship with the Jacksonville Humane Society, and they have a program called Positive Reading. And this is where our youth will go to the Jacksonville Humane Society and actually read to the animals there. And I have some pictures of what that looks like. But such a super sweet program. So it is giving back and looking at our youth in a different light, where not only are they reading, which is important, but being able to be around the animals. It's just a really sweet opportunity there for the children to interact with animals. We do have volunteers that come on our campus. So in particular, we do have a couple that comes in and provides spirituality groups for those youth that are interested. It is not required, but as individuals are interested in, we don't call it religious per se, but spirituality weekly, we do offer that opportunity. We do receive referrals from various inpatient facilities, hospitals, and we do have a registered dietitian that has to approve our menu for everything that we're providing for the children. And so we make sure that we have a well-balanced meal for each day, each meal. I truly believe in developing a wonderful continuum of care. And so this opportunity provided allows for kids to hop in and out of different programs that we have. So for example, if we have a child leaving residential, as I mentioned, 100% of those kids get a referral for something. We've resolved the crisis for the most part. Now we need to really work on what led to the crisis and then post-crisis. And so we'll refer back to either our outpatient counseling program, our community-based counseling program, where we're mostly in the schools providing a service there. So whatever that looks like that is a fit, we are requiring each referral. Likewise, they can also refer to the community as necessary. But for the most part, we have our individuals referring right back to us. If we do have a child that is turning 18 while in residential and does not have a safe place to return to, we do offer a transitional living program on our campus. And we also have a transitional living program in Clay County, which is about 25 miles away. And so that's an opportunity where they can live long-term and continue to work on emotional healing and developing those self-sufficiency skills. We have referred youth coming from our case staffing committee. So as I mentioned, if a child is coming in and is not complying with their goal plan, the next step would be to have a case staffing hearing where they are being able to discuss their concerns. We can make recommendations, and one of those recommendations is going to the shelter. Upon completing their time in the shelter, then they would return back to the service that they were already in. Youth might come to us from court, actually, for being an adjudicated SENS child. So again, they've gone through the case staffing process, still not compliant. We take them to court, and the courts may say you can go into the residential program for a period up to 120 days. Very, very few children are actually court ordered to us through SENS court, but it is an opportunity, and it is in Florida statute that is an opportunity for services. And youth may be receiving another youth-related program. For example, they might be in our outpatient counseling program. They might be having a family session. The family session didn't go well. It was really heated. They felt like they might need a break for a few days to get themselves collected, work through whatever led to the session and to the crisis. And so that therapist can make a direct referral to residential for crisis services. Upon completion of that, then they would return to their therapist here on campus. I just wanted to show some of the language that specifically addresses the Florida Chapter 984. So as I mentioned, that is focusing on the prevention side of the Department of Juvenile Justice. And so they are looking at trying to prevent a child from going deeper in the system. And so there's technically 4 arms to Department of Juvenile Justice: prevention, detention, probation, and commitment, or what they call residential. And so we really focus on the first 3 of probation, detention, and prevention. So we're really looking at how can we best serve these individuals so that they're not going deeper into the system. So they're developing and implementing effective methods of preventing and reducing acts of delinquency with a focus on maintaining and strengthening the family as a whole so that children can remain in their home. It's working to develop and implement effective programs to prevent delinquency or divert children from the traditional juvenile justice system, to intervene in an early stage of delinquency, and to provide critically needed alternatives so that they do not end up in the deep end commitment programming. We provide well-trained personnel with high-quality services and cost-effective programs within the juvenile justice system. And it provides an increase of the capacity of local governments and public and private agencies to conduct treatment programming and provide research, evaluation, and training in the field of juvenile delinquency prevention. And so each of our children, as I mentioned, are through the different screenings and assessments that we're doing, we also complete a positive action plan that is looking, it's called the PAT, looking at recidivism, looking at the risk factors that led them to come in, and how can we work to reduce those behaviors. Since March, I did want to share, we've made some changes in the response to COVID. And so when you're working in a residential program, that looks quite different than sometimes in an outpatient program. But we are practicing sanitization and deep cleaning on weekends. We are taking temperatures of our children and staff 3 times a day. Upon admission, we are completing a COVID screening questionnaire. We now ask 2 questions. The first question is really looking at a lot of the symptoms related to COVID, and then looking at exposures. We have taken the stance that if a person is coming to us and they answer yes on the COVID screening, then we are requiring them to be medically cleared before coming in. There have been some other agencies in the state that have admitted youth regardless of the COVID screening, and they've ended up having to quarantine that child, and then they had an outbreak in the facility, which led the entire shelter to be closed. And so we've taken the stance of any affirmative answer requires COVID screening. We have some locations that we now can refer to within Jacksonville that we can receive a rapid test. And so it's just simply having that individual go receive the test, get the results, and then come back to us. So that's just the stance that we've taken thus far. We also have found that the youth are answering the questions one way, and then the parents are changing their responses. And so whether it's the parent or the child, if they are answering yes, excuse me, we are requiring them to to receive that medical clearance. Back in March, between March and May, we ended up having to close our facility for those 5 weeks. We just simply did not have the appropriate equipment to manage COVID relative to the PPE, the screenings, and so forth. So we did close temporarily. We moved all other services to virtual. We opened back up May 1, and now all services are back face-to-face. So we slowly, as we opened our facility back up, we increased our capacity. So we're not quite at full capacity yet because we are trying to maintain the social distancing. But thankfully, with the amount of space, our building is about 20,000 square feet. So with a lot of that spacing, we are able to now have up to 18 youth in our program. We are continuing that those family sessions and the visitation are still conducted virtually. So in our outpatient model, the families are coming on site. Because it is a residential and a close quartered area, we are asking that those families do a virtual session. So we have a virtual platform that's called Blue Jeans that we are conducting those sessions that way. The child is receiving face-to-face therapy, just the family sessions are done virtually. Yoga is currently being conducted virtually, so they go into our clubhouse. We have a large screen there. We do have the instructor that is being seen virtually, and the children are participating that way. We are offering a hybrid opportunity for our visual art classes, where there's some weeks that the visual arts instructor will come on campus and do the art classes with the children. And other times, depending on what the art assignment is, they may be doing that virtually. The youth are required to wear masks at all times. So we are providing them with a cloth mask. They remove it upon bedtime. We wash masks every day, and then they were issued a new mask upon the next day. And then staff are continuing to wear their mask daily. And that's for our entire campus, including our visitors. Wanted to provide some metrics to you. For the last fiscal year, typically I mentioned we serve about 550 youth. We ended fiscal year 20 with 354. Certainly with being closed for those 5 weeks made a difference in that number in some regards. And so we did have a slightly less number of youth this past year. Just wanted to show the breakdown of male to female and gender nonconforming, a little bit of the racial differences. We did have 42 youth that were brought to us under that domestic violence respite program. So again, 42 youth that may have come through law enforcement, through civil citation or an arrest, specifically for the domestic violence program. 18% of our population identified LGBTQ. 97% of our youth were safely reunited with their family, and that's huge. So that means they're not entering the delinquency system, they're not entering the dependency system, and they were able to establish again a healthy relationship back with their family and reunite. 98.5% completed services, and all of our youth were able to receive a nursing triage by our registered nurse within 24 hours of intake. Just wanted to show what the program looks like. So the picture on the left is the front entrance of residential. The picture on the right is just our building as you enter our campus. The pinwheels picture was taken in April, which is Child Abuse Prevention Month. And so we had a big celebration, both physically on our campus with the pinwheels, where people were asking, what does this mean? And so it allowed us to provide some outreach and media exposure for child abuse and what are those protective factors that we can look at to ensure that does not occur. So we have 2 classrooms, and this is prior to COVID. Now that each desk has a shield up, and so they're separated a little bit differently, but each of our classrooms, we have different opportunities for learning. And so we have the instructors that are in there. They're Duval County Public Certified teachers. And so they're learning the basic subjects. And so it's amazing of how the teachers are able to assess each child. We have to have so many teachers because, again, we're serving children 10 to 17 years of age. Some may be in advanced placement classes, some might be in standard classes, some might have individual education plans, and they have to be certified in all of those aspects of education. So that's why we do have so many educators on our campus. And so the children are attending classes from 9 to 3, and they do have a break for lunch. And so again, they're following whatever the Duval County Public School schedule is. When summer break is here, we're on summer break. Thankfully, this past year, we were able to offer some summer school for the children to make up for some of the academics that were lost at the end of last school year. But we have a great partnership there with our 3 teachers. This is the female dorm. So the pink area is our children's wing for 10 to 13-year-olds. We had a group of students, they came in from the high school that wanted to do a makeover. And so they asked the children what would they want to see, what colors, decorations, and so forth. And so they picked Disney characters and they wanted bubblegum pink. So this room was painted in that way. And then the picture on the right is our larger unit, and that is for children that are 14 to 17 years of age. We have what we call level 1 and level 2 bedrooms. So the children that are on the wing for 14 to 17-year-olds, the picture on the left is an individual room. And so each of them have a wardrobe, a bed, and a nightstand. The doors are always open. So for changing clothes and hygiene, all of that is done in the restroom. We only allow a certain number of children in at a time. But we want to make sure that at night, as I mentioned, they do 10-minute night checks, or what we call bed checks, and they have to log that on the electronic notepad that we have that logs all of their information, so it goes into their clinical file. The room on the right is for double occupancy, and so this is a room for 10 to 13-year-olds. Again, it has a built-in wardrobe with no doors, and then just a bed and an end table. Most of our children are between 14 and 15 years of age that come into our program. And so it's not often those rooms are used for the double occupancy. The room on the left is our medication room. We were required by the state of Florida to have a medication distribution opportunity there. So we have a Pyxis med cart. And so that's what you'll see, that gray area there. So as the children are getting their medications, it's all loaded into the system, dispensed accordingly, and then it provides reports to see what medications and the counts and so forth that the children received. The picture on the right was a group of children who came in and wanted to do some different murals on our campus, and the hands were our children that happened to be in residential that day. And so we were just really thrilled to be able to offer that opportunity and have such involvement in our community for improving the interior of our space and making it more childlike. It's our food service and cafeteria. It's family style dining. The picture on the right says Pepsi. It's not Cokes and sodas, it's fruit juice, but we have the relationship with Pepsi. And so again, we have a registered dietitian that comes in and reviews menu. We also always have food available. So even if a child is coming in the middle of the night, we will have a bagged lunch for them to make sure that they are not going hungry until the next meal. And so we do have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and 2 meals or 2 snacks are required. But again, we offer meals any other time if a child is coming in off hours. The picture on the left is the positive reading program that I mentioned through the Jacksonville Humane Society. So here is a picture of a child that is reading to an animal. And then the picture on the right is our clubhouse. It is also on our campus. And so it just provides another setting for the children to leave the residential building, walk across to our clubhouse, watch a movie, they can play pool. We are in the midst of doing some completed renovations to the clubhouse, which will also include a theater upon its completion. Just wanted to provide some more information again about our continuum of care model. So Touchstone Village is our transitional living program to youth that are 18 to 21, and it's also on our campus. And then we have a program in Clay County. And so we do provide housing, education planning, life skills training, therapy. It has an evidence-based curriculum that we're using to assess for their life skill readiness. And so that helps us build upon what life skills that we need to continue to improve. And so, as I mentioned, if we have any individual that is aging out of our shelter, this is an opportunity for them to come into this program. And this is our new program that we expect to open in the next 2 weeks. Really excited about this. House of Hope is providing an emergency shelter opportunity for youth that are 18 to 24, really with an emphasis on those that are LGBTQ. And so we're partnering with a local agency here that is our LGBTQ support system called Jasmine. And this is really completes our continuum. So we have the emergency shelter for youth that were homeless, and we have the long-term program for adults that were homeless, but we didn't have anything that was emergency housing for adults. And so House of Hope is that program, and it's also on our campus. We will be opening, as I mentioned, the next couple weeks, but it really affords an opportunity for the referrals to come through for these young adults that are on the street and really looking for temporary housing. We're hopeful that these young folks, once they're stable, would transition them to Touchstone Village, because that is a longer term housing model. But what we are finding here is that the national average for homeless young adults 18 to 24, 40% of them identify as LGBTQ. Data is showing in the Jacksonville area is 60% are identifying LGBTQ. And so that's really what forged the relationship with us and Jasmine, is to provide an opportunity for these young folks that have maybe been put out of their home from coming out or having some differences with their family members and now being homeless, is they have a safe space to come to and call a temporary home upon them completing their goal plan, which hopefully would then be the transition to safe housing. And so we're really excited about opening this opportunity in the next couple weeks. And that is the end. I really appreciate you being part of this this presentation. And if there's any questions or comments, just let me know. And I have some information here if you wanted to reach out to me individually. Thank you.
I don't see any questions at this time.
Okay.
There is a thank you. Since we have reached the end of this breakout session, I think I will just end it then. Anyone who is interested can contact Kim if you have any additional questions.
Thank you.